Strong Pokemon, weak Pokemon. That is only the selfish perception of people. Truly skilled trainers should try to win with their favorites. Except for the guy who decided to make a team consisting of Gardevoir, Lopunny, and the rest of Squad Sus. Which brings us to an important question. Why do so many Pokemon look so human? There's even an entire egg group labeled as human-like, which Incineroar isn't a part of because of its Litty Kitty origins. I'm Krillik, and I'm here to explain what I like to call the Waifu Phenomenon. Now, this is the case where a lot of Pokemon end up looking very human. That we end up having people that get a little too into the idea of the Pokemon breeding profession, if you catch my drift. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that this doesn't get dirty. Now, I'm not interested in it, but I will also not yuck someone else's yum. I feel like that's a little too inappropriate. Instead, this is a more outside look in as we try to answer some questions that I will address soon. In addition, of course, I will be talking about those husbandos out there for those of you that would be interested in that. Now, this video will be split into sections that you can follow using the chapter markers. I'll be covering and explaining all Pokemon in the human-like egg group, specific case studies and designs within and outside the egg group, and then of course whether or not these designs are done on purpose. So for a direct quote, the human-like egg group is described as Pokemon in this egg group, as the name implies, have similar characteristics to humans. They are fully bipedal, standing and walking on two legs. They also possess arms with which they could manipulate objects or deliver blows. The majority of members of this egg group are either of the psychic or fighting type. Now, I will say Pokemon can exist exclusively inside of this egg group, or they can be mixed in as a part of it and a different egg group at the same time. Thank you, Skitty Whale Lord, somehow. Is that even a real thing? Okay, yeah, it is a thing. I always assumed that it was a real thing, but I never actually looked into it myself. You'd see the memes everywhere. You'd see the giant whale lord. You'd see the little Skitty, and that's it. Like, you won't need any other joke, because if you're in the community, you know about it already. But if you don't know, apparently they're in the same egg group. Skitty, which the tree kitty, the little itty-bitty pink cat that's, what, a foot and 2 inches tall, maybe, has a shaker for a tail that it likes to chase around a little too much. And then you have Whale Lord, arguably one of the biggest Pokemon ever outside of, what, you maybe have Celesteela. Not even. I think it's bigger than Celesteela. Either way, I'm doing that a little too much. Let's get back on track. So in the case of Abracadabra and Alakazam, the Pokédex for Kadabra even states that there was a theory that this Pokemon was a young boy who couldn't control his psychic powers and ended up transforming into this Pokemon. There was also the case for Kadabra that Uri Geller, who was an illusionist, magician, television personality, and self-proclaimed psychic, had actually sued Nintendo over his likeness being used. There was a card, I don't know if I'll even be able to find it, but there was a card that had his likeness even more so. And if you look at the Japanese name for Kadabra, which we're going to be looking at a lot of Japanese names today, I'm going to try and put them on screen as best I can. You have Jungere, which Uri Geller Jungere. It mixes. It's they call it a corrupted like name of it. I mean, you call it what you want. Either way, they messed with the name and they got that. They messed with his name. So he did sue. Years later, actually, I believe it was 20 years later, so actually in 2021, someone can double check that, he apologized and realized what that had meant and what that had done. Even though it didn't create really much of an impact to my knowledge, it still obviously did some level of harm, so, you know, do what you will. Overall, if you look at the entire line, though, you have the mixture of and combination of humans, magicians, foxes, even dragons, and some speculation on some other symbols, but I'm not going to address that as a part of it because that might be a little too much. But this Pokemon being, again, bipedal, 2 arms, is very intelligent. It's just human-like. It's not really fitting into that, like, phenomenon that we're discussing today, and that's why I want to address it. We're going to have Pokemon that are bipedal, are intelligent. They have certain characteristics. I just realized I didn't talk about Salazzle in my notes. Anywho, I'm not crazy, you are. None of this drives me crazy. So we'll talk about Salazzle later. But again, there are case studies where there are Pokemon inside and outside of this A group that fit or don't fit and that's going to support a lot of our questions for later for this research. So before I continue on that rabbit hole, let's continue down our main rabbit hole, as we're going to move on to the Machop, Machoke, Machamp, which they're very much built off of bodybuilders. Built bodybuilders, that's funny. I didn't do that on purpose. There's also the potential that they're based off of the Hindu gods of Shiva or Vishnu. The reason for that is especially when you get into Machamp and its Gigantamax form, kind of, again, the multiple arms, it's a bit of a pull. And fun fact, the male and female versions of this Pokemon don't look different. There's no actual real difference. I can't say the rest of that out loud. I have no idea if this will get monetized. And if it's not monetized, you know why. Become a member, maybe. You've seen some of the long videos. This takes time. Anywho. But also subscribe. If you haven't subscribed somehow, there's so many views on some of these videos and watch time on some of these videos. Please subscribe. It just gives me a good idea and makes me feel secure on the inside, even though subscription number is a very vanity metric type thing. And it's about the views and your interaction, which, gosh, I've enjoyed so much. Another one in the A group that does not fit this phenomenon is Drowsy and Hypno. Technically, I mean, because Drowsy is based on the Japanese myth of the Baku, which ate nightmares and was adapted to be a dream caretaker in the Japanese myth. It's also potentially based on the Malaysian tapir. I mean, tapirs, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, follows along the line of like anteaters and stuff like that. Meanwhile, Hypno becomes very, very human-like, and its design can be explained by the fact that it's likely based off of the proboscis monkey. God, that's a big schnoz. But other than that, they're just human-like, just as the A group states. Hitmonlee isn't just based off of Bruce Lee, because that's just its English name. When we take it back to Japan, we get Swamamura, which is a reference to kickboxer Tadashi Sawamura. I hope I said his name right. But that one's a pretty direct one when we look at as far as human-like creatures go. And we move on to Hitmonchan, which also has a few others depending on the language. You have Japanese boxer Hiroyuki Ebihara, you have Mike Tyson, you have Jackie Chan, and I'm not going to name them all because I'm probably just going to put them on screen because I don't want to say anyone's name wrong. And finally, of that line, we have Hitmontop, which is based likely on capoeira, especially as how it moves, like, you know, it does a little, like, have you ever play Street Fighter? You know, it does this number right here. But literally, it's a dancing battle kind of thing. If I look like an idiot during that, you can say it. I don't blame you. I'm keeping that in. It's slightly embarrassing. I can't dance. Anywho, it is a dancing type battle, or fighting, to jujitsu, martial art. There we go, martial art. That's what I wanted to say. It is a type of martial art, that's how people fight. The way that they move their legs, the way that they move their arms, and it keeps movement and rhythm so that way they can just kind of move however they wish. Again, I think my first exposure to capoeira was looking at Street Fighter, oddly enough, and it's a fairly good example to my knowledge. If anybody knows more about capoeira that might be more exposed to it and more native to it, please sound off in the comments. I would love to learn more from somebody who knows it personally, and I think that'd be amazing for other people to also learn about, because outside of Street Fighter, the only other idea I have about it is literally just breakdance fighting, which is pretty cool. And for Hitmontop, I mean, again, very human-like as well. I mean, do I have to say it? They'll be on screen, but I guess if you're just listening to this as a podcast, I could describe some of them more. Because, like, Hitmontop literally has a top for a head, the two arms. Never mind, I give up on that. And then you have Mr. Mime, its Galar form, and then Mr. Rhyme. All of them are incredibly human-like, being a little more exaggerated towards the pantomime lifestyle, jester, because if you look at the ears or even the coloration of them, and just performance in general. Now, when you move on to Mr. Rhyme, or the Galarian Mr. Rhyme for that matter, you do get into the tap dancing idea for a performance rather than using pantomiming as a performance. I'm not gonna lie to you, even though I love the idea of the light screen being something that Mr. Mime brought into existence, or the OG light screen boy or girl, I suppose, even though all Mr. Mimes are also female, and they're not called Mrs. Mimes to my knowledge, unless something changed along the way. Either way, it's God, it just every time it clicks in my head that way. It always just goes. I'm a fairy. Let me in, because it got changed to a fairy type, and it's creepy. Mr. Mime is kind of creepy. So I mean, someone's probably has it as a husbando or waifu. I don't know. There's someone out there who likes carnival type stuff, clowns in that way. I know there are people out there like that. So I don't know. Either way, that's why we're talking about it. This whole subject has me so flustered, because like, I can have a dirty mind, and I've said dirty jokes on stream before, and I'm not shy, but when I'm trying to be as case study, as professional as possible, while talking about something that could be taken into this, it flusters me so much. So you're gonna get a lot of that today, I think. Now we jump to Jinx, which becomes very obvious and had some very rocky starts as per its design that I won't talk about here because they changed them for a reason, and that's not the subject of today's video. So Jinx could actually be based on a number of different things: Viking women, opera singers, the yokai such as the Yamauba, and its skin being purple. Technically, even if it was what it was before, I have to be honest, could be very much related to frostbite. When you have severe frostbite, your skin can turn purple or even go full necrotic, so then it turns black. Constriction of the blood vessels? I have a couple of doctors and medical students in my comment section. Yeah, you're more apt to be able to explain this than I am. I've had frostbite like once, but very minor frostbite. It hurts, and you're more likely to get it again. So as someone who's very stubborn, and who has had frostbite before, I'm gonna recommend y'all get gloves to wear. I stood out in like -30 because of wind chill, and within 10 minutes, not even, without gloves, I was in pain. Jinx, though, going back to Jinx, has the blonde hair, it has the booby plates, and it has the flowing dress, arms, big ol' lips. Like, it's got over dramatized human qualities. With Electabuzz, it's more Oni and Raijin based more specifically. In addition, you could say it has some inspiration from tigers and also Tesla coils if you look at its patterning on its body and the Tesla coils on its head. Meanwhile, its head shape, unlike a couple of our other ones, isn't super human-like. I mean, it's kind of, I always imagine it kind of squashed down a little bit. I don't know why my brain thought of like the weird talking 3D putty bread thing. Ugh. But it's one example that's not super duper humanish. With Electivire, it has a more Yeti-like body, and being more based off of the Yeti is fun because you can find it in the Alabaster Icelands in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Terrifying though. You always have to pass by an alpha one towards the end before you can actually get into the end. Magmar's funny. It's a booby duck, and I don't mean that to be inappropriate. I literally mean that. Its Japanese name is literally Boober, and if you look at its like beak, duck, mouth kind of thing, which boobies, they're not really ducks. The blue-footed booby. I'm just saying it as much as I can. What are you gonna do, YouTube? Demonetize me? It's an actual scientific word. Bring it! So it has blends of salamander and iguana. The Karura or Hoyotoko masks, not editing that out, and Magmortar is just add the cannon, bro, and it's all the same stuff. So that one just has its arms and legs, unless you consider the lips that it has as DSLs. I don't know what you want from me. Makuhita and Hariyama, very much based off of sumo wrestlers. It's very obvious with their size, the way that they stand themselves, and the way that they fight, they move. I mean, their big like attack movement is a lot of this. Also, it's so freeing not to have the mic in my hands, because I could do stupid stuff like this when I talk now, and it's great. Anywho, I don't know what type of like movement that is. I think it's just palms. I'm not sure. But Hariyama might specifically be based off of the Great Gamma, In addition, what's really cool and got them points for me, because I typically don't like this Pokemon for whatever reason, just doesn't fit my preference, even though one would think they're so big, they seem so soft, is that Hariyama has the move that it learns naturally, Brine. Now, when you brine something, it's cooking it in like a salty water for the most part. That is super oversimplifying it. I'm sorry if I insulted any chefs here, but that could be related to the idea that Hariyama, or at least sumo wrestlers, they do their throwing salts before the match, purify, the whole idea of purifying the grounds from spirits and so on and so forth. Sableye is in this egg group, which the more I look at it, the more it makes sense that it is. 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, and it has a big old mouth that it likes to use to eat gems. So with Sableye, though, it is more than likely not just based off of goblins. I say Stitch because, look at it. Although I think... No. Stitch came first before Sableye. Though, at least to my knowledge. But more than likely, the Hopkinsville Goblin. As we move forward, I ask that you please forgive me if I say words incorrectly. You have every right and permission to correct me nicely in the comments below, so that way I can improve what I'm doing here. And that kind of goes for anything, honestly. I'm open to constructive criticism. I feel like if I'm going to try and teach something to people and explain stuff, then I need to keep my mind open and allow you guys to teach me something in return. So, Meditite, very directly based off of meditation, yoga, and possible Hindu origin, if you kind of look at the head shape that it has more than anything. In addition, Medicham has the traditional Badla pants like genies would wear. Bulbapedia kind of threw it at the examples of I Dream of Genie. You could literally look at Disney's Genie. Just genies in general are just depicted wearing these types of pants, or harem pants for that matter. It also could be derivative of Shaolin monks, especially as it reaches its mega form. The idea of heavy meditation, deriving your strength from that, not eating very often, subsisting off of a berry over the course of a month, so on and so forth. It's so directly based off of it. And I've had the jokes thrown at me where you just call Medicham thighs because it's got big old thighs. Croagunk and Toxicroak threw me off a little bit, but if we're basing it off of their shape, their appendages, it makes perfect sense. Croagunk, poison dart frog. Toxicroak, you throw in the potential of the hairy frog, which has the extra little bits on its hands quote unquote, that if they break off, they can regrow them and they're able to get away. In addition to the possibility of ninjas or assassins, due to those spikes that it has. It's interesting because I didn't think Toxicroak was a benevolent Pokemon. I didn't think of it as a Pokemon that as its dex states, that it won't use or really attack or fight anything unless it has to. Meanwhile, it's also still based off of, frogs, ninjas, assassins. I think that's really interesting, and this Pokemon has gone from I don't really like it over the years to moving up more and more to I actually appreciate it, and I want to use it on a team at some point. Timber, Girder, Conkeldurr. You got construction workers. They're walking over here. They're moving their stuff. Of course I had to do it. You couldn't tell me not to. Now, they're moving their stuff. You got wood to move, they move your wood. You got a couple of rebar. You need to move your I-beams. They got you there. You want some good old cement mixed together? They're gonna mix your cement and whack someone with it. That's Conkeldurr for you. But no, seriously, that's straight up. They're construction workers. Although there is the idea that they could be based off of carnival workers. There was the word carny used. Is that an offensive term? Can somebody confirm that for me or not? As an ignorant individual, ignorant's not a bad word to use. I am ignorant about things. It means you just don't know things. I don't know if that's a bad word, so I'm not gonna use it more than once, but no, seriously, carnival workers, because of their nose, and as it gets old, evolves, it actually visibly looks like it's getting older, especially as it hits Conkeldurr. If you look at Japanese depictions of old men in anime or drawings, you kind of get like that nose sometimes, or otherwise just get those similar facial features, or even like the bump on the head that's actually there for this Pokemon. Other than that, I mean, it even gets the veins as it gets bigger, or at least the veins are shown differently as it evolves. So it's consistently working. It's the building of muscle and constant construction. Sock was one that was interesting to me because it's possibly based off of Masayama, which is a karate expert who liked his isolated training. I didn't dig much into it, but that was interesting in and of itself, that it was directly based off of someone, not just some general karate. In addition, Sock and Throw were originally supposed to be more Oni-like or Oni-based. Sock kept its eyebrow that it has. They were supposed to have horns, but they started looking too much like our Genie Pokemon, which we'll talk about later, which is why they wanted to redesign them and set them off differently. I would actually love to see what they would have looked like, even if they looked a little similar to those, because I'm not really much of a fan of Sock or Throw. They're incredibly human-like. They just look like a thin guy and a bulkier guy or stockier guy that are in karate uniforms, which again, I know there's people out there who like this, and not in the waifu husbando way, but just how it is. Throw is a judo practitioner more specifically. I didn't see anything that they were based off of anyone in specific. Gothita, Gothorita, and Gothitelle very much directly based off of the Lolita fashion or the Victorian clothing fashion styles that you would find during the Rococo period. Do I know what the Rococo period is? Not really. I just know Victorian, and my brain said, move on. But Gothorita may actually represent Virgo, as it does in the Unovan horoscope as a whole, rather than just in the Unova. But then Gothitelle, if you look at its Japanese name, Gothitelle, fits Gothic and Mademoiselle together. So even if you're not looking at it in regards to the clothing or the face that it has, or the fact that it does have lips and arms and a hairstyle and everything else that would show that it's a human of sorts or human-like, then even its name says Mademoiselle, which Miss is basically what that translates to. There you go. Also, it also fits together the idea of stars and foretelling together, which makes this Pokemon way cooler. It kind of like flew over my radar a little bit, or under my radar rather, as a Pokemon that I go, yeah, you're solid. And then I moved on. But looking back on it, it's pretty cool, especially when I've seen some of the gifts that there are of it. LGM and BHM, Little Green Men, Bug-Eyed Monster. That's it. They're aliens with big ol' heads and human-like bodies. It's about what you'd expect. Meanwhile, Poniard, it is a Japanese bandit based off of Ashigaru armor and samurai in general. Specifically, it was said that it was intended to have humanoid and insectoid qualities. And there's nothing specifically extra about Bisharp, or Bisharp rather, and Kingambit. I mean, you have Pawn, Bishop, King, which is sick, and I do enjoy that they added Kingambit in there in the newer games, at least to round out this trio and add more to it as a whole. I don't know, it's a cool design. It's Pokemon I never really got to use in the games, and I didn't really realize that like it had the whole bandit idea going for it. I knew it had the samurai armor, nor did I really pick up on the insectoid qualities as much. But that's just because I wasn't looking for it. But now that I am, I see it very clearly. Toxtricity is kind of cool because it's based off of lizards, newts, and actually the punk rock movements, or rather just punk guitarists, during the UK movements that happen in general. They have the spiky hair. They have literally the high energy, low energy that the two forms have, based on like even just looking at the way that they carry themselves. One of them standing like with their chest up like this. The other one just like way over haunched. They're not just humanoid qualities in terms of the way that they look, with exception to, of course, like their neck into their head, which follows into like the newt salamander idea, but also their behavior. which if we go back and look at a lot of these Pokemon, we could say the same thing for a lot of them. It doesn't just shine through in regards to how they are depicted, but also how they behave. And I think that's super important for what we're going to talk about next, which became by far one of my favorite backgrounds to Pokemon ever. We have to start out with Charcadet though. Charcadet is fire type. It's a cadet, early, low ranking, young one in training. But when it evolves, using whichever specific item you decide you're going to use, depending on your game, you either get Armarouge, which is based likely off of the Spanish knight Wilfred the Hairy, who had gold armor and a shield. Now, Wilfred didn't consider himself a part of Catalan, even though he was a huge part of their history, and I didn't deep dive into all of that too much. I did skim it, but ultimately, if I'm remembering everything I can correctly, they were vital in so many different parts of it in regards to strategy, organization of settlements, and even avenging in the appropriate way a king that had been assassinated. And there was the case in which their armor was decorated, I believe, by another king to have the red stripes on it. I believe it was 3 broad red stripes, which you can similarly see in Armarouge's armor. And I think that's so cool to have these tiny little details be such a big part of what a Pokemon is. And when you run it all together, you find out where it could be from or related to. I don't know who finds this information. Like, I use Bulbapedia, and then I dig deeper and I try to analyze it all further, reading some of these articles myself as best as I can, as much as I need to, without, diving down 300 other or rabbit holes. But where does this, these are such, I don't want to say pools, because it becomes very obvious once you see it in front of you. Though I will say Ceruledge is the one I was speaking about earlier when I said one of my favorite backgrounds of all time, bar none, because it can be related back to El Cantar de Mio Cid, which is a person in Spanish history who had done something similar to the Armarouge idea. Now, instead of being in charge of 100 different things, the long story short is that they had their special swords, or their named swords of Tizona and Colada, which they used often. Like a Ceruledge has 2 swords. They fought for all the reasons that they had fought for, and they were trying to avenge fallen companions and individuals in general that were important to them, and they had their name besmirched. And it wasn't until after they died that their name was cleared, that the person died that had done all these wrongs, and he had actually avenged those before him. And if you look at the Pokédex for Ceruledge, it basically talks about vengeance and the idea of trying to go back for vengeance. This Ceruledge Pokemon is a revenant of sorts. It's essentially this story as a Pokemon that didn't get its vengeance and didn't have its name cleared. But maybe one day it'll have its name cleared. I don't think Ceruledge and Armarouge will ever get actual evolutions, but it would be interesting to see if they end up getting some sort of Mega, or if an alternate form comes out, or whatever it might be. I think it would be really cool, even because they're not going to get alt forms. There has to be something else potentially here. They have left it open for additional design and growth. So now we're going to move on from just the ones in the human-like egg group into the ones that are in the human-like egg group, but also in another egg group. So no more exclusives as we step into, we're going to step into speaking about Ralts. It's a child, it has a bowl cut, it is a representation of empathy. Now, when you move on to Kirlia, it has a lot of designs based off of ballet dancers. I mean, it even stands on points. I go onto my toes as if I don't go onto like, well, I can kind of go on my toes, but you can't see it. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm just bouncing up and down now. Anywho, also, really cool information, Kirlia could be based off of Kirlian photography, which is the idea that photos will reveal like spiritual energy, emotions, so on and so forth, like an actual aura around the individual. And that's just sick. Because again, they're the idea of empathy. I'm going to drive that home because I'm talking about this very waifu'd Pokemon next, known as Gardevoir. They have mixtures of ballet dancer and knight, even the Barbuda helmets, because of the bob cut that they have and the way that it swoops out and kind of spikes at the end of it rather than just being a normal bob cut. They could be Guardian Angel because of the fact that they're very tall. They have the white flowy dress. They are very protective of the trainer that they have bonded with. It's the one thing that is shown over and over again in dex entries or descriptions that you get of this Pokemon. I can feel myself getting flustered because I'm trying to stay professional on this. But if the trainer goes down, it's going to just unleash all of its power in order to keep that trainer protected. It does have its other humanoid features derived from the more blank Japanese paper doll, and when you move into its mega form, it has this ballroom dancer to it. I will state now that when you go from its normal to its mega, you can see the like sharp crest on its chest, or horn as they specifically call it, actually open up. That is said to be the physical manifestation of the bonding between Pokemon and person in terms of empathy, as the metaphor is that it opens its heart, and as such, it is now able to unleash power like never before. I feel bad for Gardevoir. If Pokemon were real. Nope, we're not talking about that. Gallade, not all that too different, as you can move on to Gladiators and the Corinthian helmets being inspiration for this Pokemon's design. It's also very knight-like and chivalrous in its nature, and a little bit on how it holds itself up. So again, we get a lot of that influence of not only human-like physical qualities, but also human-like behavior and tendencies. Here's what I wasn't really expecting, actually, because Volbeat and Illumis are based off of greasers and 1920s flappers. You have Volbeat, who's kind of holding himself up. He's got like the big old, like his arms on his chest, holding himself up. He's got the yellow and black stripes on them. He's kind of looking a little mean. Just that appearance, and it kind of looks like they're wearing a jacket. Meanwhile, if you look at Illumis and the 1920s flappers, you get like the very like, I don't know how to describe that hair. I should have written it down, but I think you know what I mean. But the way it stands, the way it holds itself up, it has, you know, it almost looks like it's wearing a little bit of makeup, in addition to, again, going back to the hair. So they're not ones that I would expect anyone to waifu husbando things out of, but they have very strong human inspirations, actually. I don't know. Spinda's in here, and it's a panda. It's a Kinling panda, or Chinling panda. Okay, unless someone wants to correct me who is a native speaker on it, it's Chinling panda. Wait, I just learned it. Anywho, so Spinda, Chinling panda, potentially a stuffed toy as well. If you look at like its small stature, the fur, everything else, it almost looks like what are those things called? What were Doodle Bears? You know, Doodle Bears? That was before. That was technically like before. No, after my time. After my time, I'm not dead. I'm not in the afterlife speaking to you. Anywho. No, if you look at Doodle Bears, that's what it reminds me of, even though these came out before Doodle Bears, to my knowledge as well. I might have to look into that. But otherwise, they're just kind of based off of someone who's dazed or dizzy, considering how they move around. I'm so happy, again, I don't have to hold the mic, because I could do all the stupid things and move around. We're going to move on to Cacnea, and I'm going to stop dancing. Cacnea is very straightforward, as we have a barrel cactus and jack-o'-lantern based inspiration. In addition to, as it evolves into Cacturn, you just throw in the fact that it's very much based off of Scarecrow, and how, you know, scarecrows would have like the pumpkin head jack-o'-lantern-esque thing going on. If I also remember correctly, jack-o'-lanterns weren't always pumpkins. They were turnips or radishes. I believe they used to be turnips in some regions. We move into Gen 4 with Chimchar, which very directly based off of a chimp, potentially just a general young baboon. Monferno having the golden snub-nosed monkey trait, mandrills, again, or baboon. And also as we move forward with it, and it becomes a fighting type and how it fights, you have the play on monkey kung fu, which I thought was just like a joke. No, it is straight up a real thing. You have drunken monkey, I believe sleeping monkey, I think it was iron monkey, and I don't remember the other two, but it's like the 5 monkeys, which I thought was thought it was the animal style fighting, because if it's just general animal kung fu, which is its whole thing in and of itself, I believe, then you get the whole idea of like the Kung Fu Panda, which I know you have tiger, snake, monkey, praying mantis, tortoise, Shifu isn't necessarily part of that, and then Po being a panda, which isn't necessarily a part of that either. You have the mantis is not part of the year. There is no year of the mantis, right? I feel stupid. And because I feel stupid, I'll let you guys educate me, because it's irrelevant to this video actually, and it's just extra information. And it's just better. Sometimes it's just better to let you guys explain it, because there are so many out there. There's so many of you out there that know things that I don't know, even if I did do research. So I'm going to trust you on this. What I do know is that Infernape has some qualities that are similar to Hanuman, which is in a Ramayana Hindu tale that could have inspired Journey of the West, and it has qualities similar to Sun Wukong, which straight up is in Journey of the West, and inspired Goku. And if you look at, oh gosh, is it Jin? Jin and Tower of God. Both of them are based off of Sun Wukong. And now we have Infernape. We have this like trio here, and I don't know how many others are based off of Sun Wukong. And I think that's amazing. I think that's genuinely amazing. It's been out long enough. I could say that about Tower of God, right? now we're getting into the other ones that I don't want to talk about, but I have to talk about because I decided to do this video because I let you guys vote on it. Baneri. It's a rabbit. Potentially it also has the basis in the rolled up skirt, because it has like the fluff around the mid of its body, and it has its ear down, which some fashionable hats did have like that sort of style to it. And then we move on to Lopunny. If I get demonetized, it's because of this moment right here. And if I don't get demonetized now, it's going to be because of another Pokemon later. Lopunny, Lop Rabbit, women's faux coat, Mega Form, 1980s aerobic outfits, and potentially inspired by the Playboy Bunny. Now, when you look at a lot of that, I sat and thought, no, I refuse. You could say that all you want, and I don't want to believe it. So I did some research, and it turns out Playboy as a company is second only to Coca-Cola in terms of famous names for middle-aged people. And the bunny logo is popular with young women in Japan, as it is seen as elegant and chic to them. Chic, right? Is that how we say it? We're gonna say it's chic. So it actually could be very much based off of less appropriate origins. Here's another one for all you furries out there that like to have one. I don't know. That wasn't meant to be an insult, honestly. I just had to speak to you directly on this, because I'm sure there's a lot of you in this watching this video. And again, I'm not gonna yuck your yum. Now, my preference, but I'm not gonna yuck your yum, and I'm not gonna shy away from it, because this is all still very interesting to me. Because Lucario, there it goes, boom. African golden wolf, coyote, Egyptian mythology leading into the depiction of Anubis, especially because it's able to actually read the auras of people and their life energy to some degree. And then finally, its mega form having basis in the Egyptian wolf. So it has a very big spread. It has very human body and then coyote head. So do with that what you will. Again, I'm trying not to over-explain because we're going to talk more in depth about a lot of this later as far as my takeaway. Mianfu and Mianxiao, I'm going to do a direct quote. According to Ken Sugimori, Mianfu and its evolution were created after the game planners requested for fighting-type Pokemon based on animals, since most pre-existing fighting-type Pokemon had been humanoid in appearance. It's named after an ermine and likely based on Weasel yokai Kamatachi. So this one's very direct in terms of its inspiration, and it throws it a little bit more together as we touch on Mianxiao, which has the Shaolin Kung Fu, whip fighting, and the flowing sleeves that you'd see in like operas for those tendencies. I was about to try and do it, but I realized this lab coat kind of fits me decently well, and I feel like I'm gonna break my shoulders if I try to scrunch them in any further than I did. So we're not gonna do that. But that one was one that I thought was fairly obvious, mainly because of the flowing sleeves, which I'm a fan of. I'm not really, like, they didn't make a huge impact on me, but I always appreciated the flowing sleeves of Mianxiao. Halucha! Luchadores! Aztec Eagle Warriors! Why did I go almost full Wario on that? I don't know, but anywho, yeah, I didn't play X and Y, and you know who needs to play X and Y and hopefully do a Nuzlocke blind and maybe get a Halucha on his team because it's freaking cool? This guy. I want that. I saw it and I went, damn it! Oh, it's so good. Like, I don't, oh God, I can feel the Spanish bias in me, having seen not luchador wrestling or anything like that. Like, I'm freaking Puerto Rican. I'm not like, I didn't have that. That's not something, you know. But I had family members that liked wrestling, and I saw, I don't know if his name has changed over all these years, and I should look into it. But like, I don't know, Rey Mysterio, back in the day at least, dude. So yeah, I saw Halucha, and I was just like, yeah, they're cool. They're very, very directly based off of luchadors. They have the coloration, they have the mask, they have a bird body with nothing else really to it. I mean, they're a raptor, so that's as far as that goes. Pancham, while being based off of a giant panda or a chinling panda, has its evolution Pangoro, which is more directly based off of humans. More specifically, Bancho, which are Japanese juvenile delinquent leaders. Literally, if you have not made the connection before, think Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The second I saw Pangoro, when I was playing Sun and Moon for the first time, I went, yada yada does it. Like, that is Jotaro. That's it. There's no other name for a Pangoro. Get Matt Mercer in here for the English voice on Pangoro at some point. I don't care. It needs to happen. It makes perfect sense. Okay? Yeah, if you don't know, Matt Mercer does Jotaro, and he does Hit from Dragon Ball Super, amongst many other things. Scorbunny, Raboot, Cinderace. White Rabbit, potentially even more so the Jataka tails, apparently, with Scorbunny, because the idea is that rabbits have a really high core temperature, and because of how fast they move, their high core temperature and everything, there are legends or tales where the rabbit, when it was first created in, like, you know how animals are created in, like, myths and everything like that, that it was a creature that jumped into the fire and made it out for whatever reason, because I can't quite remember and I don't want to say anything actually wrong, that as it escaped, it was gifted, like, new abilities and stuff like that. And that's basically, like, as we move and look at Scorbunny, you have this fire rabbit at higher core temperature, higher speeds, and fire abilities. Then if you look at Raboot, it's just wearing athletic clothing now. And Cinderace, soccer, football, libero position. Which I say libero position because it actually has the ability called libero. So, or I believe libero means liberty. So libero does mean liberty or freedom. It is apparently the defender / back position, which very interesting. I don't really know soccer. I'm sure somebody here does. I keep doing that this video, but there's a wealth of knowledge in people, and it's always nice to share. Clobbopus's name could actually be derived from the word for spoiled child, which is dadako. Meanwhile, Clobbopus's name in Japanese is Tatako. Very easy. I mean, Japanese people enjoy their puns. You can see it everywhere. It's fun. With Grapplocked, very much jutsu motifs, wrestling, so on and so forth. I mean, locked, like to lock someone down, grapple and lock someone down, makes sense. What I wasn't aware of was the octopus wrestling that happened in the 1960s, where you would, just walk out into the water and try to wrestle a freaking octopus. Like, that's a thing? That was a way of training, apparently? I get it, you gotta tie down 8 arms, so you're going all over the place, but like, why? Why? That's so excessive. I don't know. I just, it's cool, but also like a what the heck kind of moments. You know what I mean? They are humanoid or human-like, but they kind of just, they have the appendages, but when you have 8 arms and you can stand on 2 of them at least, of course you're going to be human-like, especially when you are dedicating at least 2 of those appendages to punching the heck out of something. Impidimp is fairly straightforward, as it's likely just based off of an imp, maybe even the Lincoln imp. And then with Morgan, which I always imagine as like a moody teenager, it has like the big bang in front of its eyeball. It's potentially based off of Claricon of Monaghan from Irish folklore. That is a leprechaun. It's also very similar to Redcap legends, and it being a gremlin. Also has the Green Knight and Arthurian legends due to the false surrender move that it has, or Morgan Le Fay from Arthurian legend that uses fairies and fairy magic to mess with King Arthur and its knights. Now, the reason why I said all of those really fast is because the false surrender, or moreover, if you look at its Pokédex and what it's described as doing, what it likes to do is it does like to mess with people. It derives energy, just as Impidimp did, from bothering people, from annoying them, from making them angry. And after doing so, or after their opponent lets down their guard, or when it decides that it's going to like surrender and it puts its head down and the guy comes close, it's like, ha-ha! And then it just stabs him with the nose. Like, it just bonk, gone. So it's got these very backhanded tendencies, which is why it's a dark type. But then you have all these fairy-based influences. And remember that fairy in Pokemon might end up being more supernatural creatures. Whether you're looking at like angels or mythical creatures or whatever else it might be, creatures of legends that aren't legendaries, you kind of also get the fact that you have other types of Fey creatures, which is why and what brings us into Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl, the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. The Fey are not always happy-dappy, I'm gonna be your friend. No, the Fey are twisted creatures, or can be very twisted creatures depending on what type of background lore you are looking at. They could, you could drop a penny or $1 and you go, hey, can you pick that up for me or something? They pick it up and then go, you owe me your life now. And they won't say it like that, but it's very much a favor for a favor. It doesn't matter how big or small the favor is. Or they could perceive love as, I keep you in a cage, and that's how I love you. And you're like, I don't want to be in the cage. Let me be a bird. Set me free. And they're like, but you have everything you need. A home. And you go, I need food. and water. And they go, boom, boom. Now you have everything you need. And then you go, I need more than that. Boom, boom. And it's never going to stop. You know, Fae are weird. They derive by different logic. Grimmsnarl has a number of different things going on for it. It has like those incredibly strong, muscly body because of the hair, which is really cool because hair fibers, muscle fibers, all of it comes together and makes it stronger. In addition, I don't know why I'm flexing. You can't see my arms under my lab coat right now. Anywho, I've been all over the place, and hopefully you enjoy that. It's so much of this is by memory, with just a few notes, which I could release in my Discord again. If you're not part of the Discord, you should be. With Grimmsnarl, you also get inspirations from not just the potential of the fairy tale Grimms, the Fae, the fairy, so on and so forth, but also the Wicked Witch of the West. It's got the pointed nose, it's got the green skin, and it could potentially be seen as a parallel to the Hatrem Hatterene line, as they're also very much witch-based. They have the different coloration. You have dark versus light coloring, and even though I wasn't really a Wizard of the Oz movie type person, I really need to see Wicked at some point in my life, or whatever. It's very much that bubble witch. I don't know if she's the Witch of the East. Nevertheless, you have these two opposites that can very much be witches. Also, when I think of a green witch, I don't think of the Wicked Witch of the West first. I think of Gruntilda. Now, let's take a look at our special case Pokemon. We're going to look more specifically for now into our grass types, because there's always the joke of when you have a grass type, it either turns into a tree or turns into a waifu. So, we're gonna start out with Ludicolo. Very Hispanic origins. It has maracas. It derives energy from dancing. What else could you want from it? It's somebody's type, and I respect it. Rosella and Roserade takes on a more feminine stance and masquerade style as it reaches those points, based on like how it moves its leg, how it holds itself. You could argue that it's less feminine and more of, again, another type of like Hispanic dancing, considering you could have like the rose in your mouth and you could do, you know, the whole thing. Again, I don't dance, so that could be an argument you could make. So depending on how their stance, it could be a more feminine or masculine base. Just as a quick note, any of these Pokemon that I talk about from henceforth are either not in an egg group or are in an egg group that isn't the human-like egg group at all. You have Lopunny, which is a very tall bug grass type Pokemon, where its naming basis could be on the idea of a nanny. It has very nurturing tendencies. It will care for other Pokemon, and it even has like the way that it wears its leaves that it makes, I keep moving my hands like this, anywho, is very nanny-like in that old nanny dress style. So I was actually very happy that I figured this one out, or rather found this out, for Lilligant. Direct quote, Atsuko Nishida mentioned in an interview that she came up with Lilligant while looking at Lily's inner home. Furthermore, Lilligant's design was intended to give the impression of an extravagant princess. End quote. Meanwhile, Hisuian form was more of like the figure skater, which you can see in a lot of its movements and its intro when you first fight it. So, when we look at Pokemon that have very direct inspiration from humans or human-like qualities in terms of its appearance, this makes sense. And you could look at this in the idea of it not being what people usually see it as, but moreover that this is like Gardevoir's dress, for example. When it becomes Mega Gardevoir, it's got the I don't know what it's called. It's got the poof. It's called a poof. I'm gonna call it a poof. Unless someone corrects me, I'm calling it a poof. Masquerada has some basis in the Iberian Lynx, Harlequin stock characters, Masquerade balls, or masks in Mardi Gras in general. It has a very showy type of personality to it, the way it walks, the way it moves, very theater-like. So overall, that one's very direct as to why it's based or looks the way that it does and behaves the way that it does. Arboliva was the one that I sat down and I made the joke of, now while you might have Pokemon that are grass types that either turn into tree or waifu, you have the one that turns into both in one. So this, as I looked into it, is based off of the olive tree, but also the reason why it has a more feminine humanoid appearance in general is because it's likely based off of dryads. You know, the creatures and fae of the trees. Here's the one I'm gonna have to read, and I have to read it a very certain way. Serena, I'm just gonna direct quote. I'm not even gonna bother because I just don't want to read anything else. I don't want to imply anything else. I'm just gonna read what Bulbapedia had mentioned because I can't really say anything else as an argument. Serena appears to be based on a mangosteen and a female monarch, such as a queen. It may also be a reference to the mangosteen being known as the queen of fruit. It may also be based on a dominatrix, a woman who takes the dominant role in Bible discussion study meeting activities. It evolves from Steenie after it learns to stomp. Its moveset includes moves such as punishment and power whip, and its appearance gives it the impression of wearing long boots, all of which are associated with Bible discussion study meeting in some fashion. Its gender ratio may be a reference to mangosteen trees, of which all known specimens are female. God! It's so much. It's so much. I could have sworn there's something else in here. Hold on. That's not, like, there's more here. No, it's not in here. It's not in here. I don't know why it's not in here. But if I remember correctly, the word queen in Japanese can be used as slang for the dom, which I guess it could be the same thing in any other language. I don't know why it wouldn't be at that point. I'm not talking about it anymore. This is the one that it makes it so hard for me to just assume that this wasn't on purpose. But we're not talking about that now. So I'm working out after this, and normally I wouldn't include this in the video, but I'm drinking pre-workout. So if I get more insane during this, you know why. Why am I like this? Why am I a harbinger of chaos? This has always been what it is. If you made it this far, subscribe, share the video, do all that good stuff. Because I do this research all the time. Not only because I enjoy it, but because you enjoy it. And I'm going a little crazy about it. Also, your support ensures that I could do deeper research videos that would involve me looking into things such as what was the first dog Pokemon, which would have to be based off of real research into what the first dog was. And I have plenty of books that can help me figure that out from accredited writers and scientists and doctors. So by supporting me, you support the research that I can do about real life stuff, so that way I can accurately convey it to you while attaching it to Pokemon. I'm gonna finish drinking this now. So let's step away into the others that I'm willing to entertain as possible husbandos or waifus, no matter what body type or personality that you might be associating it with. Such as Embor. You got the big pot belly pig. So you have Zangfei from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms stories, or the Demon Pig from Journey to the West, or just War Pigs in general. It's got 2 arms, 2 legs, and it stands on its 2 feet. You got those fire Pokemon that don't know how to stay on all 4s like so many people want. Keep it the cat on all 4s. Blaziken has the Shamo chicken, Horus, Ra, and Koruda, the fire-breathing chicken, in addition to Muay Thai fighters included in its creation as a possibility. Another standing tall, fire-type Pokemon that, I mean, it was a chicken. It started off on 2 legs, it stayed on 2 legs, so there you go. And then there's Incineroar, a professional wrestler. Potentially a heel, considering that it's a fire dark type. If you don't know what a heel is in wrestling, it's supposed to be the bad guy, essentially. Your antagonist, the guy who turns heel. Get it? Turns around. No longer a good guy, so on and so forth. They play the bad guy, and they do it well, hopefully. And of course, it being based off of a tiger, and one that is all over Rule 34 stuff left, right, and center. I'm telling you guys right now, my search history is absolutely ruined. I guarantee it, because if I look up images of any of these Pokemon in order, I'm screwed. It's gone. It's I have ruined my search history infinitely for the next 2 to 3 months until Google realizes, oh, he doesn't like it that way. Haha. Zoroark, another furry bait for y'all out there, as it is likely based off of kitsune and werewolves. It has the bipedal body to it, and ultimately, actually, according to Ken Sugimori, Zoroark's large mane being tied into a ponytail is supposed to be a stand-in for its lack of a tail. And I thought that was really cool because I never actually realized it didn't have a tail. I thought it was just a tiny little nub that I never realized or knew was there. As we look into Zorora, you have Raiju basis again, you have tigers, potentially even Kanekili, which is the Hawaiian god of thunder. Oh, and if you don't know it, Zorora was rumored to have been born when lightning hit an erupting volcano. The 1 in a trillion chance, I don't know what the actual chances are, of a volcano erupting and lightning, boom, hitting it. And that's sick. And potentially even based off of Zeus by its namesake. Each of these Pokemon, as we're moving forward, and the ones that we've talked about, have, you know, humanistic tendencies again. They have, some of it's just in the eyes, some of it's in the way that they hold themselves. I mean, Incineroar literally has a 6-pack, but wrestlers do too. So, again, I'm trying so hard not to delve too hard into the final discussion point of this video, but it's hard not to at least briefly go over it. Shiftry. I say Shiftry because if we look at all the previous stuff, Shiftry would fit into our categories of waifu or Hispando. I don't know if anyone's ever done anything with Shiftry. I don't want to find out. I don't want to find out. I did not ask. At least not firsthand. If someone's done it, fantastic. But I don't want to see it. I'm just going to put it that way. That's not what I was asking. But Oak Tree and the Tengu, in addition to the Nutcracker doll for its humanoid appearance. When we look at mythical Pokemon Magearna, it has its basis in the Karakuri puppet and rabbits. Very obviously, considering it has the big old ears behind its head, and it has this big old dress as well. Now, the dress and the clothing that it wears is very reminiscent of what nursemaids would wear, which are people that are caretakers for children instead of their parents, or whether the parents are there or not, usually when you look at rich families and so on and so forth. Which, what does Magearna do? Magearna is a nursemaid by all means. It was built by people with a soul as its center, which is the actual Pokemon, and then the structure around it to be very homey, to be very welcoming. Sure, that's whatever. You know what I mean. And it also might represent Mahina, which is the goddess of the moon. And when you look at Mahina, you can translate that to machine. Deontay is a little bit fun. It does have, it makes me think of the Squidward when he eats too many Krabby Patties, and I'll never get over that. I know it's a very pretty Pokemon. I know it has basis on the Carbuncle. If you don't know what a Carbuncle is, it actually goes back to old Chilean folklore, if I remember correctly, where there were creatures that would live in the caves and have gems on their forehead. Now that kind of spreads around a lot. Carbuncles are an inspiration for a lot of different Pokemon, and actually in Yu-Gi-Oh as well, there's literally a Carbuncle series of creatures. And it's because carbuncles aren't actually consistent in regards to how they look, whether they have fur, they're reptilian, mammal, human, actually I don't know if there were any human ones, whether they were inhuman completely or otherwise. The only consistency that you can relatively find is that they always had a gem as a part of their body, more specifically kind of looking at the forehead. So that's where that comes from. Meanwhile, the rest of Deontay and its inspiration can be derived of the princess, or the princess cut diamond, which is a very expensively cut diamond, almost kind of a perfectly cut diamond, in addition to when it mega evolves into the brilliant cut diamond. Now, These are types of diamonds that their cuts are either kind of, I don't want to say a myth in the diamond cut world, but they are incredibly difficult to achieve or unachievable if I'm believing the princess cut properly. Now, it also could derive how it transforms on the magical girl transformation, you know, when they spin in a circle and they do like the whole arms up and then woo, magic. Yeah, that's where that all comes from. Look at your Sailor Moons. Mewtwo, I'm putting you Mewtwo here because it fits everything else, and I'm sure there's something out there. No, I don't want to see it. I said it already. Gray alien, vertebrate embryo, and a salamander. You put them in and you accidentally put chemical X. Boom! You get Mewtwo, technically. Not actually, well, I mean, yeah, maybe. Anywho, that's Mewtwo. You know Mewtwo's origins. I'm not talking about it here if you don't. Another Pokemon that I didn't really get to experience actually boils into Meloetta, which has basis in the Greek muses. Flamenco dancing, musical notation, especially because you can kind of see it around its body, ballerina for its pirouette form, possibly even Nefertiti. And again, the magical girl transformation comes back for this one in specific. Also, because it has Meloetta, eta is a feminine diminutive suffix in Italy. So, between how it wears a dress and the way that it holds itself and everything, very, very strong human inspiration. Then you have the really weird ones of Tornadus, Thundurus, Landorus, and Enamorus, but here's the thing, they're all based off of genies, and you can very, very specifically derive those from things like what classical genies would look like or be derived from in stories. The only difference is we wanted them, or I shouldn't say we, but when they're created, you're gonna make them more powerful looking. How do you display that power in a second? Delphox is a witch fox kitsune, which kind of is like saying chai tea, I realize, saying fox kitsune. Oh well. But nevertheless, we've touched on a number of other kitsunes. If we look at Zoroark, for example, also has kitsune basis. Kitsunes are able to go from their fox form, have their intermediate form, or turn into a full human. They might still have fox-ish tendencies and stuff like that, which it depends on the story that you're reading and looking into, whether they're more traditional or more modern stories, and it's all dependent on that. So when you have a creature that is turning human, of course it's gonna have more human-like appearance, human-like tendencies. So the kitsune basis brings a lot of that together, with exception to Ninetales, which is very much just a fox with kitsune abilities. The only other thing with Delphox is it is based off of, or has some basis in, mages that you would find in RPGs, D&D, so on and so forth. Florges is a bouquet of flowers. It has the 18th century poof hairstyle or puff head style, and potentially based off of the hyacinth flower or mermaids. I mean, you could kind of look at the fact that at its midsection, it kind of has like the white belly, then it goes in, and then comes back out with what seems like flippers of sorts. So you mix all that together, it has a very feminine look to it. Almost didn't put Primarina here, but I feel like if I didn't, it would be a sin considering it's very mermaid-like. It's a sea lion mermaid mixed with a siren, considering all of its singing and all that it does. And no, we have not all mermaids are sirens. We have a squares are rectangles, but all rectangles are squares situation, because sirens' intended purpose are to lure people in so that way they can drown them. I don't know why I immediately went to just grabbing, I'm not going to describe the motion because that's just going to make it even worse for YouTube on whether or not this video gets monetized. But it also has, because of its like frills and I don't want to say ribbons, but its appearance in general has basis in ballerina, opera, and Pierrot characters, which I had to look up Pierrot rather, because I just didn't really know about it. But it's like they're costume is kind of where that comes from, where it has like the wavy frills or accents to their clothing, which Primarina also has, and Primarina could also be based off of Selkies, which are also part of their own whole story. Quacker Ball has a lot going for it, whether it's based off of the peacock, the Iberian red-knobbed coots, which sounds like a horrible thing now that I said it out loud. That sounds like such a horrid insult, but it's not. Why are people allowed to name? Like, what scientists are out here naming birds? Because all of them are like, haha, booby, haha, red knob, haha. Anywho, I love it, but man, it's the flusteredness here is whoop. Ducks, geese, carnivalesque performers such as those from Carnival of Santa Cruz de Tenerife in the Canary Islands, which are known for their distance from the Iberian Peninsula despite still being part of Spain, which, looking at information regarding this Pokemon, says that it like hails from a different land, or that it dances in a different land, something along those lines. It might also be based off of the Basque Lamia, or Lamia, I say Lamia, which is a duck-footed woman that walked along the lands and danced and stuff like that. So that was an interesting one. You got Buzzswole. God, I love Buzz. Oh, it's so good. Easily one of my favorite Ultra Beasts. But bodybuilder mosquito, very comic book character, hero-esque base. I mean, look at any hero from old comic books where you have just this absolute beast, just the pure muscle, all of it right on display. And even in modern comic books, you still get that. Look at your Marvel. Look at your My Hero Academia. I don't care if you're a nerd, a geek, a weeb, or whatever you are seeing these hulking masses at least once in every series you look at. I mean, you can even look at The Boys if you want to, because whether they're a good guy or a bad guy, they're freaking ripped. Pheromosa is based off of the American cockroach, most likely. It's just very, like, bleached out, very clean. So it's the opposite of a regular cockroach, or potentially based off of Copepod and fashion models. Look at how it holds itself. Look at how it moves. It wants to stay clean. It almost seems as if it's walking on the runway a lot. So there's a lot of basis there. And finally, Alcremie, or Alcremie, whipped cream or éton mess, which is a British dessert made of fruit, meringue, meringue, meringue my phone, meringue my bell, because I've lost my mind, and whipped cream. I keep it there because I know people, and it has a human-like shape to it. I feel bad because it's a very innocent Pokemon that just wants to help in the kitchen. From here, though, I do digress, as there are so many others that I could get into that furries would really like me to cover, or anyone else who just wants to see me suffer cover, and no, I will not discuss that one, no matter what. It was not designed to be a waifu or a husbando. I don't care what the text says, I don't care what the copy pasta says, I refuse. So, anywho, ultimately, these are the ones that I will entertain, that I've already talked about, as we enter the most important question of the day. Do all of these Pokemon become designed in the way that they are in order to elicit the special interest or suspicion of it that people have towards them? Are they really made with the intent to become waifus or husbandos? The answer is more complicated than just a simple yes or no, as we have already looked through all of this information and can derive our complicated answer. So, when we look at Pokemon, one important thing that you want to make sure you do, and this goes from a Pokemon design standpoint, whether you are the actual Pokemon designers, whether you are making Fakeamon or anything else, one of the biggest things you could do out the get-go is make sure that your Pokemon is visible or known to be identified simply from its silhouette. Why do you think Pokemon as a series, as a show, would play the "Who's that Pokemon?" You can tell who it is just from its outline, unless it's a Voltorb, Jigglypuff, wow, I wasn't supposed to swear. I gotta bleep that out. That's what's happening here. You have Pokemon that are move like this. They have their arms like this. They might be posed in all these different ways in order to make it so that way you can tell who they are from the get-go in just a silhouette, just from a tiny icon or a tiny image. Well, there's only so many positions. Oh god, why in this video did I have to say that word, phrase? Anywho, there's only so many that you can position in terms of art, and as such, your job is to then create enough unique designs without overcomplicating the design, so that you still have that easily identifiable image. Now, the other important thing to consider is that all these Pokemon are based off of not just one or two things, multiple things that are meant to be incorporated into the final design. If you look at a lot of them, yes, they're gonna have more feminine or masculine designs because of what they're based off of. If you look at fruits in general, if you're gonna base something off of a fruit, when you look at fruit, while there is no like defined actual like male, female fruit, at the same time, the common misconception is that fruit is seen as female because it's derived from the flower. As such, there's a lot of fruit Pokemon that, when they're derived from the flower or fruit, are depicted as more feminine. Meanwhile, you have others like Incineroar, which are based off of wrestlers. And again, another misconception based off of just general mindsets is that wrestling is only for men and not for women. It is both, and it's inclusive. So the idea then is that despite all this, younger people are going to look at wrestlers and think, boy, strong, like fighting, so on and so forth. So what is your target audience then? You're gonna make a strong, physically masculine Pokemon then. Which brings into the next point, actually, is that strong feminine or masculine features are used to attract those that would see Pokemon as cute, cool, pretty, ugly, mean, or nice, and more. I mean, Melodic and Primarina fight with each other because they want to consider themselves the most beautiful Pokemon in existence. You want to elicit a reaction from your audience. Not every Pokemon that is made is meant to be loved by everybody. It is meant to target certain people. They're created by a team of people to target the interest of different people. Like, for me, I'm somebody who enjoys ghost and poison types a ton. I would be a poison type gym leader. I love the color purple. I mean, my favorite Pokemon is Gengar. I mean, some of my, actually, a lot of these Pokemon on this shelf are my favorites, and some of it has to do with just the type of Pokemon they are. Some of it has to do with their personalities, what they've done for me, and what I've been able to attribute a story to them in Nuzlocke. Then the list goes on. So how do you ensure that you try and hit these audiences? Well, you cater to these ideas. You can look at round Pokemon and you can see that they're friendly because circles are friendly, round, soft, friendly, cute. And then you look at other Pokemon and make them intimidating. They're more jagged. Maybe there's more triangles or sharper features to them to make them look a little scarier, a little bit more powerful. And then you have everything in between. You can look at the information on some of these Pokemon, such as Gardevoir, which I believe I stated it earlier, that when it goes from its normal to its mega form, it opens up its heart.
that's what the visual metaphor is. It is supposed to be an empathetic Pokemon. Yes, it might have basis in human qualities, but it's made in an innocent sense while also wearing a very beautiful dress. It's empathy, it's care, and it's shown very clearly that that's what it was intended to do. Ultimately, Pokemon are purposefully made to be more feminine or masculine in order to exaggerate the desired features that are meant to represent the concepts that they are based on. Meanwhile, there are the very few cases where we could argue that the dirtier references were done potentially on purpose. I'm looking at you, Serena, and you, Lopunny, but I digress off of that because in the end, you can still look at Lopunny and its culture. It ultimately is culture. As much as there might be flack for that, and as much as people might not enjoy that, it is culture. It is something that is indicative or a part of Japan. And if you look at Serena, it still has all this, it has the fruit basis. It's gonna end up, you know, maybe it did start off as a Pokemon that just didn't want to be touched. Maybe it was very much like Pheromosa. Maybe it was one that, you know, it doesn't like people. It doesn't want to be touched. It's gonna have an attitude. Well, ultimately, when you look at human nature or animals or anything else in between, nature in general, you have things that very clearly display that they think that they are higher than you. They don't want to be touched, even if they don't think they're higher than you. It wants to have an intimidating appearance, one that makes it less approachable. And ultimately, that's what Serena is. It has, you know, it has the long eyelashes, yes. It has the more, like, it has the boots, and it has everything else. But to the, I don't want to say the average person, but I'm going to say the average person, and, you know, don't take offense to it. But to the average person, that would seem very unapproachable. Especially if you look at it from the eyes of an innocently minded individual. Now, when you look at the dirtier minded individual, of course, you're going to sit there and go, "Auga," and you're going to want to go after that. Because that's just who you are. And that's where all of this comes from. At this point, I can say I'm satisfied knowing that these designs are made with the intent to stay in the minds and hearts of everybody, young or old. They do this to elicit a reaction, to entertain, to get people to talk about this game that has been around since 1996. And I still didn't talk about Salazzle, which is a harem Pokemon, which is very much what some animals do anyway. I'm done. I'm not talking about it further. I'm done. And ultimately, guess what? I do the same thing. I don't have to, you know, be all up over the place and talk like this to you know, but I do it to elicit a reaction. What stays in your mind? What's fun for me and what's fun for you? And that's it. That's creativeness. That's creativity. That's creating something in order to stay in the minds of people, in order to get what you want, to elicit these reactions. And that's what you do in your medium. And that's what Pokemon has been doing. So once again, to TLDR this, does Pokemon create waifus or husbandos purposefully? No, not necessarily. Because it's all just to get a proper reaction and to represent what their inspirations are as best as possible, while continuing to market their product to you. With that then, I do want to say thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Comment below anything else that you want me to look into for research. I have a list of things that I want to do, and there's been a lot of really good comments. If I made any mistakes in this video, you have every permission to let me know. I am not perfect. I am one person doing all of this, and I'm sure I will make a mistake, and I like to learn from my mistakes. I am very much the type of person where I believe that if I'm never told about my mistakes, I will never grow. So there is that, and I'd be open to any arguments or recourse. I don't want to say recourse sounds bad. Any potential counter arguments that you might have or what you might believe as an individual. Keep it clean, of course. I don't want to see anything crazy in the comments below. That's, you know, gets into the more lewd stuff, because I've kept this very, very clean to the best of my ability. If you found this entertaining, please share the video. In addition, before I go, I have a charity stream that I'm doing on August 10th of this year, 2024. It is for the Children's Miracle Network. I have already done posts. There is a QR code for it. There are links. It is in my Discord. If you cannot donate to that, share it with people anyway. Be there for the stream. I plan to make this a big event, and there's a lot of stuff along the way, so that way, when we reach the goal, or as we are getting closer to the goal, every $100 that are reached, there will be something new. Eating hot, spicy peppers, reading Pokemon fan fiction, and if I get to the 2,000 goal, the $2,000 goal, I will get a tattoo of a turtle on my body. And if you don't know where the turtle stuff comes from, go watch how everyone gaslit me into believing that Burmy was a turtle. That's a fun one, and I'm never letting that one go, I guarantee. So, with that, outside of watching all my other videos, the playlists that I have created about Pokemon theories, research, my Nuzlocke, even coming in to join the live streams because I love talking to you guys live. It's so much fun. That wraps up what we have for today. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I will see you next time. Bye!